Wisconsin Realtors Association is pleased to present this virtual conference session entitled Systematic Lead Generation. We are very pleased to welcome all of you to this session. Now it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Kathy Zimmerman. Kathy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. I am Kathy Zimmerman, broker-owner of RE/MAX Community Realty in Lake Mills, Wisconsin, and also a WRA Real Estate School trustee. One of the responsibilities of the Real Estate School is to provide interesting and informative educational programs to help you in your business. Today's session is full of valuable information guaranteed to help your business, and so I hope you take advantage of it and the knowledge our speaker can offer. Feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat box, and I'll do my best to work with our speaker to answer them during our time together. If we're unable to answer all the questions, we will respond after the program. So without further delay, let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Maura Neill, and I just wanted to give you a little information on Maura. Maura is a second-generation realtor who combines her love for the industry with her passion for education. Maura is an active realtor who leads her team and works with buyers and sellers on a daily basis and speaks nationally on real estate technology, building our business via social media, customer service, and client retention. She was the 2014 Georgia CRS of the Year, the 2015 Atlanta Realtors Association Realtor of the Year, and is a graduate of the 2016 class of the NAR Leadership Academy. Maura is also a Platinum RPAC investor, a member of RPAC President's Circle, a member of the 2017 class of the NAR RPAC Hall of Fame. A lover of all things Atlanta, Maura lives in Johns Creek, Georgia, with her husband, Ben, her beagles, Charlie, Jarvis, and BB, and a cat who remains anonymous. So let's welcome Maura to our conference today.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I'm so excited to be here. Before we get started, I want to give a big kudos to the Wisconsin Realtors. I am so impressed that they are doing their first ever virtual conference for their membership. What a great way to deliver education and value to the members. So I hope you all know how lucky you are. This is not something that every state does. So this is definitely something to thank your state leadership for and your staff. So the session I'm doing today is called Systematic Lead Generation. And we're going to get back to basics a little bit. I want to talk about generating leads, but I also want to talk about what comes after that. Because, of course, anyone with a website, anyone who can cold call or door knock can generate leads. But what do we do after we've generated them? We need to put some serious thought into getting back to basics in our businesses with not just the generation of leads, but then with lead incubation and lead conversion. So to start off, I want to remind everyone there is no silver bullet. Nothing that I am going to be able to tell you today is going to magically put leads in your inbox and transactions in the queue for you. Similarly, there's no magic cookie. It's not Alice in Wonderland. Everything that I'm going to talk about today takes some systemization. It takes planning. But it really does get us back to basics as we start to think about how do we move forward. When I was at your conference in 2018, we talked a little bit about low inventory markets and how, similarly to the market that I work in Atlanta, a lot of you were in low inventory markets and generating leads was a little more difficult. But if we get our mindset back to basics, we do some very simple business planning and some habit forming, we can start to see, even in a market where the inventory is low, we can start to see our business pick up. And also, I think it's important to remember, as we talk about this, that real estate is a cycle where a lot of us are feasting right now. Famine could be just around the corner. So all of the planning that you put into place now and all of the systems that you put into place and the great habits that you form around habitual and prioritized lead generation means that your business will be strong even when the next inevitable downturn happens. whether it's just a little bit of self-correction in the market or it's another big downturn, knock on wood, hopefully not, like we saw a few years ago. So as I said, we're going to talk about 3 stages in lead generation. First, we're going to talk about lead generation and how do we generate leads, and how do we put in a system into place to make sure that we are actively doing lead generation activities on a day-to-day basis. We're going to then talk about lead incubation and what you do with those leads once you have them to keep them interested, to keep you top of mind with them even when they're not quite ready to buy or sell a house. There was a really interesting study that Google did with NAR back in 2012. And I say this every time I talk about it. I really hope that they'll do an updated one sometime soon. But there was this interesting study called the Digital House Hunt. And NAR found in our profile of home buyers and sellers that most consumers like to stay anonymous for about 2 months before they're ready to contact you, reach out, have a conversation. So in that 2 months while they're Googling you and stalking you online, they're trying to decide which realtor to work with. Google actually says that 2-month period is a little bit too short. It's probably more like 24 months. So if you think about that, the incubation period is really the most important. If buyers and sellers are looking at us as realtors for up to 24 months before they're ready to let you know who they are, to give you their contact information, to have a conversation with you, that incubation period is so important. And I can speak to that personally. Back in August of 2018, we had 2 closings that were long-term incubations for us. One of them was a consumer who had originally come to our website and looked at a property 3.5 years prior, and one was a lead that we'd been incubating for almost 5 years. So if you think about the importance of having a great system in place, because so many times those consumers can fall through the cracks. We can forget they're out there. We're caught up in our day-to-day business, our transactions that are in process. So I want to be teaching you and be thinking about ways to keep those incubated leads bubbling, simmering in the pot near the surface. And then, of course, finally, we've got lead conversion. We've got to convert all these leads that we've generated and we've been incubating over time into no longer being a lead, but actually becoming a client that gets you to the closing table. And I like to think about lead generation as a funnel, and there are a lot of speakers and classes that talk about this. But I use this illustration because I believe that a lead that is completely anonymous is that top layer of the funnel. It's the top layer that's in red. It's leads. Once they are in incubation mode, which means that they've given you something, right? You're incubating them, which means you either have a phone number or an email or a mailing address. Maybe there's some digital communication back and forth. They email you a question occasionally, or you can see that they've watched your BombBomb video that you sent them. You can see that they're fishing around on your website and looking at properties. Then they become prospects. When that prospect is willing to talk with you, to have an actual conversation back and forth, ideally in person, like, for example, a listing appointment or a buyer consultation, then, in my opinion, they become a customer. And then, of course, when they sign on the dotted line with you, they become a client, when they sign that buyer brokerage agreement or that listing agreement. So keeping that funnel in mind, you may have so many leads percolating out there that you don't even know are there yet, because if they're anonymous to you at this point, they're in that 2-month to 24-month period. That, to me, is a great reason to start systematizing your lead generation activities. Whether you create community videos or you have a detailed website that explains the buyer process or the seller process and breaks it down into steps. Perhaps you're actively adding content to your website in the form of blogging or video blogging. If the term blogging is intimidating to anyone, which I know sometimes it can be, a lot of people's minds, blogging, they feel that blogging refers to somebody who's going to write every day. Don't think about it that way. Think of it as content creation, adding new content to your site so that every time those anonymous leads come back to your site, there's something new for them. There's new valuable information, either about your market area, things to do, parks, recreation, shopping, dining. All of that is information that buyers and sellers want to see. They want to see that you're the local expert. So content creation is a fantastic way to keep those leads coming back. And it's a great way to get them to finally break that anonymity, to raise their hand, to give you an email address or a phone number and become a prospect. So keep this funnel in mind when you think about lead generation. And as we get into this discussion about leads, I think it's really important to really remember what a lead is. If we were in an interactive classroom right now, I would ask, please raise your hand and tell me what you think a lead is. And a lot of people say things like, a lead is anybody that you come into contact with. A lead is anyone who wants to buy or sell a house. A lead is someone who comes to your website and looks at properties. A lead is somebody you meet in the line at the grocery store because you're wearing your realtor name tag that day. But I think it's most important to remember that a lead is a person. A lead is a person in need of a solution for a problem that they have, a person in need of information, and a person in need of a service. So when you begin to think about it that way, look over what you're doing for lead generation. When you do, when that lead does become a prospect and you finally have their email address, perhaps you're putting them into a drip marketing campaign. But are you trying to really personalize that to them so they don't feel like they're getting drip marketing? Because you and I know what it feels like to get something that's clearly a canned email. We are super sensitive to it, I believe, because we're in the business of sending those types of emails. But I think we're a little blind to it when we're sending them ourselves. And if the more personalized you can make that your drip marketing, the more you're going to create that trust and rapport with those leads and make them want to become prospects who then want to meet with you and become customers. So consider the importance of things like having mixed media. The reason that sites like Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat are so popular is because as humans, we are habitually visual. So photos and videos are your friend. Take a lot of photos of the market area where you work. Talk about the places that you go. Create video messaging that's part of your drip marketing campaign so that buyers and sellers can see your face and see your smile and hear your voice and see your body language. That's important for creating that trust and credibility. But also, the more you find out about a lead, the more personal you can make your drip marketing be. And what I mean by that is if a lead initially is anonymous and they finally give you their email address and they ask you a question, they say, I want to sign up for your newsletter, or can you refer me to a lender? A natural question might be, are you a first-time home buyer or have you purchased before? If they're a first-time home buyer and you can then put them into a more specialized drip marketing campaign that sends them information that a first-time buyer may want or need other than just a generic consumer on your site, you're starting to tailor your messaging to them and to their unique needs. So spending a little bit of extra time creating those marketing campaigns and creating those drip marketing emails and videos so that the more you find out about each lead in your pipeline, the more you can tailor what they're getting from you, makes it feel more personal. And the more personal you can make your lead generation and your lead incubation seem to the consumer, the more likely they're going to be to stick around. Nobody wants to feel like they're just getting dripped on. No one wants to feel like they're just getting generic marketing emails. One of my pet peeves is when I get what's obviously a marketing email, and I'm sure you've gotten similar ones that say, "Dear first name here," because whoever the sender was either didn't have my first name or they bought a mailing list and they didn't think to do the mail merge correctly and put in my first name. But if I get an email from someone that says, "Dear first name here," obviously now I know that this was not personal. It went to hundreds or thousands of other people, and I am going to be less likely to be impressed by their services. So put some really serious thought into what you're doing online. So let's talk about lead generation. There are a few things that I think are must-haves in lead generation. The first one is you've got to make it a priority. You've got to prioritize lead generation into your daily or your weekly activities. And once you've done that and it becomes a habit and it becomes a part of your regular routine, it seems like second nature. But there's a great saying that I've heard many fantastic speakers say, that you need to work on your business and not in your business. When we get caught up with the day-to-day, contracts and checklists and clients calling and emailing and asking questions, we're working in our businesses. It's when you prioritize and you time block and you take some time out of every day or on a weekly basis and you say, for the next hour, I'm just going to do lead generation activities. And what I would advise is that you make those lead generation activities ones that are within your comfort zone, because you're going to be more likely to be systematic about them and to keep doing them if you're comfortable with it. So an example would be part of my morning routine. Every morning when I get up and I make my coffee, I sit down and I write 3 to 5 handwritten notes every day. Sometimes they're to clients, sometimes they're to our service providers to thank them for taking great care of one of our clients. Maybe it's to a realtor who referred me a client. Maybe it's to a prospect that we're courting and we have their home address, so I want to send them a handwritten note, or to a client who referred us to one of their friends. That is an every morning, Monday through Friday, lead generation activity for me. And that's in my comfort zone. And I know how special it feels when someone opens up their mailbox and they have a handwritten note that's hand addressed and not just a stack of bills or junk mail. Outside of my comfort zone would be doing something like door knocking or cold calling. I might do it once or twice. I'm going to be supremely uncomfortable while I'm doing it, which means I'm not going to do it long enough to make it a habit. So find those lead generation activities that are comfortable for you. Secondly, know who your client is. Think about who your ideal client is. And this doesn't mean that you need to pigeonhole yourself. This doesn't mean that you need to turn down clients that don't fall into your niche. But I'm a firm believer that every realtor has a niche, whether you know it or not. And one way that you can find out what your specialty is, you may know what your specialty is. You may say, I'm a luxury specialist. I work a lot of luxury properties. I know how to market them. I know how to work with that buyer type. But when I talk to a lot of realtors on the road and I say, what's your niche? People say, oh, I don't have one. Oh, I'll work any buyer. I'll work any seller. And that's great, but I would bet a nice cup of coffee that you probably do have a niche, even if you're not sure that you do. So one of the things that I suggest is that you definitely start tracking every lead that comes in and every lead that turns into a client. Now, when we get to the last slide today, I'm going to give you a link and I'm going to give you a bunch of resources for free on my website. But one of the things I'm going to give you is lead tracking spreadsheets. You may have your own. That's great. But if you're not tracking your leads right now, that's a lead generation task that you should be doing. Because not only are you needing to generate leads, but you should be knowing where they come from. If you're spending any advertising money online, for example, if you advertise on Zillow or on Realtor.com by buying a zip code, or if you advertise on Yelp or a similar website like Angie's List, or Kudzu is one that we have in the Atlanta area. If you're just spending money and you're not tracking where your leads are coming from, then you're not sure if you're spending your money correctly. Similarly, if you farm a neighborhood, if you have a neighborhood, a geographic farm that you send mailings to regularly, you should be tracking all of that. So I'm going to give you these tracking spreadsheets, but knowing who your ideal client is, if you go back and track the last 3 to 5 years of your business, now if you've been in business less time than that, that's fine. Just track as far back as you can. But when you look at these tracking spreadsheets, you should be tracking where that lead came from, what type of lead it was, what type of buyer, what type of seller, and you'll start to notice patterns. And it's really helpful because it doesn't mean that, for example, if you find that 65% of your buyers last year were first-time home buyers, and you start putting out great information and content on your website that's great for first-time home buyers, does that mean that veteran home buyers who have bought 5, 7, 10 properties are not going to use you? No, you're just going to be creating great content for first-time home buyers, which is really content for all buyers. But it gives you a focus in your marketing. So tracking is not only important to help you focus your marketing efforts, but it's also important to help you know who your niche client is and to know if you're spending your money in a smart way. Focus on establishing and building relationships and building on those relationships once you've established them. Now, you might say, if these leads are anonymous, how can I possibly build relationships with them? That's going to be a lead incubation task. and that's absolutely true. However, you are establishing relationships even with those leads that are anonymous. The more you keep them coming back, the more that you keep them wanting more content from your website or encouraging them to ask you questions, encouraging them to get pre-qualified, doing video content so that they're seeing you and they're hearing your voice. You're building relationships that you just don't know about yet. And that's so important. If you've ever walked into, for example, a listing appointment and someone that maybe just called you the week before or 2 weeks before that to schedule the appointment, and they ask you something really personal. For example, we have clients all the time that we've never met before who ask us, how are the Beagles? And that means that I know they've been looking at me on Facebook, they've been looking at my Instagram or my YouTube channel, or they've been poking around on my website for long enough that they now know something personal about me. And it sounds a little creepy, but in this day and age, if you're putting things out there on social media, then you should hope that those clients are finding them. Actually, you should be hoping that those prospects are finding them because you're building relationships that you don't even know about yet, and that's what keeps them coming back for more. And finally, budget your time. I'm a very strong believer in time blocking. My very good friend Bobby Howe from St. Joseph, Missouri, teaches a fantastic class on time blocking that I sat through about 2 years ago. And I was one of those realtors who was kind of all over the place. I love that every day is different. I love that I have a job, career where my days are flexible and no 2 days are the same. But I was kind of flying all over the place in a frenzy. So now having the benefit of working on calendaring and time blocking is so important. And I would certainly say that failing to plan is planning to fail. The year that I started doing some serious business planning, and part of that was blocking out time for lead generation and blocking out time for adding content to my website, the very next year, it can't be coincidental, my business flew. It was, we had way more success, and we've been very successful throughout the time that I've had my team, but it was a noticeable difference, and I can only attribute it to the fact that I had put some habitual and systematic planning in place. So think about creating your ideal day as part of having some time budgeting going on and also prioritizing. When I teach calendaring now as a workshop class, the thing that I hear from a lot of agents is, well, I don't know what my day is going to be like tomorrow. How can I block out an hour here to make phone calls or an hour there to write handwritten notes? And here's what I think about that. Our clients may think that a lot of their needs are immediate. But if you tell them, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Smith, I can't show you that house today at 11, but I can show it to you at 2. Does that work for you? Our clients will respect our time as long as we start respecting our time. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. But when you think about creating your ideal day, you should be putting in what you think are the time blocks that you need to be able to do those lead generation activities. So for example, when I created my ideal week or my ideal day, every day for a week, this is in an ideal world. In an ideal world, I would get up 3 mornings a week and go to the gym. And then I would come home, and when I have my coffee, I would do writing, whether that's content creation or handwritten notes. I would have lunch with a client twice a week, coffee with a client once a week, and have my client appointments in the afternoon. For the most part, once you put this in a calendar, it gets easier and easier to stick to. Now, does that look like a typical realtor week? Of course not. But it's the act of putting it in the calendar and making a strong effort to have this be your ideal day or your ideal week. We know that most weeks look a little bit like this, but when we put this into the calendar and you start to create those habits, lead generation becomes more systematized and a more normal part of what you do. But it's working on the business instead of working in the business. In a perfect world, I would have every Sunday off. What I can tell you is that once I put this into practice, I started having 1 or 2 Sundays off a month because I tried to make myself a priority as much as make my clients and my business a priority. And it really, really does work. So I would encourage you to work on that. But most of all, you've got to remember that lead generation cannot be passive. So what do you need to be doing? You need to make a list of lead generation activities that you are comfortable with and then put that plan into place. Handwritten notes, content creation for your website. If you call expireds and FSBOs, set out a time of day. Don't make it random just whenever you can fit it in. Set aside a time of day or times in the week to sit down and do those activities. If you like door knocking, do that. If you know that you get business from certain local networking events like Chamber of Commerce events or your BNI or your Power Core groups, but you sort of can't find the time to go to them regularly, put them in the calendar. Make it an active part of your day and your week instead of something passive that's an afterthought. So you've generated all of these leads. They're coming in through your website or through your marketing efforts on Zillow or Realtor.com or through your geographic farm, your networking efforts, et cetera. Wherever your leads are coming from, they're all going into your database, I hope. If you don't have a database that you use to keep all of your leads and all of your contacts and your sphere of influencing past clients in, I strongly recommend that you have some kind of a CRM, a customer relationship management system. Usually when I teach face-to-face, I ask how many of you have a great CRM that you really love, and about 20 to 25% of the hands go up. And I ask how many of you have one that you don't really love, but you use it because you know you need one, and another 20 to 25% of the hands go up. And when I ask how many of you know you should have one, and you know that you need one, but you just haven't gotten around to it yet, it's usually about half the room. So think very seriously about exploring and finding a system that works for you, even if it's an Excel document, even if it's Google Sheets that you keep in Google Drive, or if it's something more sophisticated like Wise Agent or RealVolve, which is my favorite one, or the one that we use on my team, or Top Producer, or just something where you are keeping track of all of those leads when they become prospects and you get their contact information, and you've got your drip emails built into that, and you've got contact information and notes about each prospect and customer before they become a client, somewhere that you can access it from anywhere, whether it's from your smartphone or your tablet when you're on the road or you're in the office, but have a place where you're keeping all of that information. And we talked a little bit already about creating those personalized drip marketing campaigns, but I can't stress that enough. There's nothing more frustrating as a consumer than having your inbox filled up with a bunch of emails that feel generic. They feel like they're not aimed toward you and your needs, and they feel like you're just you're just a number. You're not a person. You're not a face in the crowd. You're just one more lead in someone's database. And I know you all know that feeling because we all experience it. But things to think about with lead incubation. Be responsive as quickly as possible. I'm sure any of you who have ever advertised on Zillow or Realtor.com or talked about online lead generation, that the person who responds first is generally the one who gets the client. So being as responsive as possible. And sometimes that means maybe even having an autoresponder, looking into some systems that could be an autoresponder for you. I know if you have a Facebook business page, you can put an autoresponder so that when someone sends you a message, they immediately get a message back that says, thank you so much. I'm going to be back in touch with you ASAP to answer that question. But sometimes even an autoresponder is going to get you the prospect and get you into that mode of incubating them as a lead. It's the customers who have reached out to realtor after realtor after realtor and had no response that get frustrated. So we wonder why they work with the first person who responds to them. It's because there are so many others that they've reached out to that haven't bothered to respond. So find a system that can help you to be responsive. If you're a solo agent, this is even more crucial because if you don't have a team or an assistant to be responding to leads when you're out showing property or you're in a closing or a meeting with a builder, then you're potentially losing opportunities. Next, make sure that you're adding value. Don't just send drip marketing emails for the sake of being seen in the inbox one more time. Make sure that you're giving them valuable information, and make sure that you're giving them valuable information when you're adding content to your website. I get asked a lot, how do I get over writer's block? How do I know what kind of content I should be adding to my website? And I think the best advice that I could give you is to keep a running list of the questions that you answer every single day on a day-to-day basis. And you know the ones I'm talking about, the ones where you are feeling almost robotic, like you're a broken record, because buyers will ask you all the same questions and sellers will ask you all the same questions. For example, how do I stage my home? How do I know if I need to take down what personal things I need to take out of my home before I list it? How many houses should I look at before I pick one? Why do I need a home inspection? What's radon? What's earnest money? How much are closing costs? When should I talk to a lender and get pre-qualified? All of those questions that you answer every day. In my workshop version of this class, we take about a 10-minute period and we write down, I have everyone in the room work in teams and write down as many questions as you can that feel like those questions that every buyer and seller asks. And we get really, really long lists of questions. And that right there is your website content. If you break each of those questions down into a single question that you can give a 3 to 4 line answer or a 60 to 90 second video answer, that right there is your website content. And if you wrote 2 or 3 pieces of content a week, or even if you just wrote 1 new piece of content every week and added it to your site based on those questions that consumers ask, you would never run out of content because there's always going to be more questions. Shay Hada, who is a realtor in Chicago, does this. Every time a buyer or a seller asks her a question that she knows someone else is going to ask her too, she writes a quick blog post or shoots a quick video of herself answering that question, and then she puts it up on her website. So the next time that question comes through, she can direct that person to that answer, and she knows that as people are Googling those questions, they're going to find the answers on her site. So think about not just sending drip marketing emails for the sake of staying top of mind and staying in their inboxes, but for the sake of adding value. Make a connection. Find something that you have in common. Ask open-ended questions and then ask 3 follow-up questions. In other words, don't ask yes or no questions. Don't say, have you already spoken to a lender? Don't ask any questions that they can just grunt an answer to. Say, which lenders have you already spoken with? And if they say, well, I haven't spoken with any yet, a great follow-up question is, well, would you like me to refer you to one of my lenders that I know will do a great job for every one of my clients every time? So ask those follow-up questions and capture as much information as possible, whether they're emailing with you or texting with you or you finally get someone on the phone and you're working toward that in-person appointment. Take really detailed notes and ask as much information as possible. These buyer intake forms and listing intake forms are another thing that you're going to be able to download from my website when I give you the link at the end. But asking the same questions, once you get that buyer or seller on the phone, having forms like this where you are sure that you're going to ask every buyer and every seller the same question consistently. Not only is this great to make sure that you don't forget to ask certain questions, but it's also great to help you avoid fair housing or accusations of discrimination. Fair housing violations, to help you avoid fair housing violations or accusations that you were discriminatory. Because if you can show that you asked every buyer and every seller the same question, then you've fulfilled that part of your job and of your of the Code of Ethics as well. You can take these when you download them from my site. I strongly urge that you customize them to your needs. If you specialize in condos, you may need to add some other questions. If you specialize in historic homes, if you specialize in a certain area, add those questions and customize it. And like I said, make sure that you have a CRM where you're putting all of the information that you want to be able to remember about those clients when you've spoken to them. Things like what they're looking for. For example, this was a teacher who didn't want to live in a house in the same school district where she taught, as many of our teacher clients have that preference. So have that place that you can access from anywhere. This is a sample of a screenshot from RealVolve, RealVolve. I'll actually type it down here in the box for you. RealVolve.com is my CRM that I use. I don't get anything if you use them. I just strongly urge you to check them out if you need a CRM and that's what you're looking for. Oh, for some reason it's not sharing, but I will, let me do it here just to see if that'll go. And that should have shared with you. Okay. And then some strategies for lead incubation. Website content, obviously, adding that content, rethinking your drip marketing, consistent communication, be consistent. Put that drip marketing on some kind of a schedule where maybe it's once a week or once every 9 to 10 days, but definitely think about consistency. Don't send them one email and then drop off the planet, because you do need to stay top of mind while still adding value. Respect consumers' communication preferences. Ask people how they like to be communicated with, and then respect that. Anticipate their questions and needs, and keeping that list is a great way to do that. That list of all those questions that buyers and sellers ask you. Always have a call to action, such as to search for homes on my website, click here. If you'd like me to refer you to my preferred lenders, click here. And always have a place where consumers can do that. But we like to be told what to do, right? I mean, think about all those posts on Facebook that say, you know, like this post if you don't want puppies to die, or, you know, share this post if you respect our military. We tell people what to do, and then what do? They do it. So make sure you have those calls to action. Lead conversion. And I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna speed up a little bit, but I don't want to leave anything out. You want to create affinity. Use Facebook, use social media, Google those consumers, and see if you have mutual friends, or if you went to the same college, or you grew up in the same town. Have those things that you can say, we have this in common, or hey, how do you know John? But finding those things that you have in common helps with lead conversion, of course. Start the conversation. Make sure that you're anticipating the information and the needs that they have for you. Work really hard to set the appointment. My husband does a lot of our lead conversion. A lot of our phone calls, initial calls, go straight through him. He's an excellent closer at setting the appointment, getting them to agree to sit down with us and explaining that it's so much easier for us to have a face-to-face conversation. And it really helps you to see, too, how serious that buyer or that seller is. And then, of course, formalizing that relationship, getting that listing agreement signed, getting that buyer brokerage agreement signed. And I would also urge you to consistently review your action plans. I'm going to give you a link. I have a 5-year program. I give you my buyer version. It's contract to close with 5-year follow-up. So there's a link to that on the page that I'm going to give you at the end. But consistently review your checklist, your contract to close. Add content where you know maybe there's a void, there's a hole. The example that I'll give you is that on my team, we realized that we weren't sufficiently communicating when the inspection period ended, when we successfully negotiated repairs. We were like, okay, congratulations, that's all done. But we weren't giving a really comprehensive look at what that meant and what the next steps were. So we knew we needed to add an email that the minute we finished those repair negotiations and we were successfully moving forward, we needed to add some communication that just explained what that meant and what comes next in the process. Because it's really second nature for us, because we do this every day, but we have to remember that our clients don't buy and sell homes every day. Some of them may not buy or sell a home even every 3 to 5 years anymore. A lot of our clients are looking for homes they're going to stay in longer term. So keep in mind that what's second nature to us, our clients need a little bit more explanation about. I like to point out the difference between service and hospitality, and this is from a really great book by Danny Meyer, who is a restaurateur in New York, and his book is called Setting the Table. So I highly recommend that. But he says, service is the technical delivery of a product. Hospitality is how the delivery of that product makes its recipient feel. Service is a monologue. We decide how we want to do things, and we set our own standards. Hospitality, on the other hand, is a dialogue. It requires thoughtful listening to the other person and follow up with a thoughtful, gracious, and appropriate response. It takes both great service and great hospitality to rise to the top. And I think about this in the real estate perspective from what we do every day. Service is all the stuff you have to do. Service is what you do to stay legal. How do you get your client a lead to a prospect, to a customer, to a client, to the closing table? And that checklist of, collecting earnest money, negotiating repairs, etc. That's the stuff you have to do. Hospitality is the stuff that you do that fills in all the rest of the gaps. It's the things that you do that make the client feel like they are your only client, It's the things that you do to make every client feel special and acknowledge that they are unique and that they are important and they're not just another commission check for you. So hospitality, think about that from the perspective of how do you consistently review your action plans and add in those hospitality pieces. And then finally, we need to think about raising the next generation of clients. And that means what are you doing after closing that will keep your clients coming back and keep them using you again and again and keep them referring you? Because when, oh, that's supposed to be 90%. Excuse that typo, not 907%. 90% of clients were satisfied with their realtor and would refer them or use them again, but only 10% did. And that's because they forget who we are because we don't have that consistent post-closing plan. So like I said, I give you my contract to close as well as my post-closing plan, but think about having at least a 5-year program of sending valuable information to your buyers and to your sellers after the closing table. And that can be anything from information about local events to how do they file for their homestead exemption to keep their property taxes low, curb appeal and home maintenance tips that are seasonal, adding value consistently that way. Make sure that you're reaching out and touching them and that you're being thoughtful. Birthday cards, home anniversary cards, getting things in their mailboxes so that they're seeing something other than just junk mail and bills. And then, of course, getting face-to-face as often as possible because you want to also be staying in touch with them outside of just their email inbox and their mailbox. And think about those small gestures, right? You don't need to do massive client appreciation parties, even though those are nice, and if you do those and they work for you, that's fantastic. But sometimes just small gestures, like reminding someone when they close that they should reach out to their mortgage company and make sure they get that escrow account reimbursed or sent back to them. Making sure that you have things within your contract to close checklist that are thoughtful, that are outside of just the things that you have to do to get the deal closed, and it's things that are actually reminding clients of things like turning off or turning on their utilities and how far in advance should they be contacting moving companies, et cetera. And remember that diligent follow-up and follow-through will set you apart from the crowd. Don't be those 90% of realtors that get forgotten because they don't follow up after closing. Be the 10% that keep those repeat clients because they know that they need to follow up and keep top of mind and continue to add value even when technically the client relationship ends at the closing table. You want those clients of yours to think of you as clients for the rest of, think of you as their realtor for the rest of their lives. So we have about 2 minutes left. I just want to give you, this is, take a picture of this or screenshot it. This is the link that will bring you, it's my website, mauraneill.com/lead-gen. It's a quick, like 2 or 3 question survey. It's just your name, what city or state you're in, and if you would like to opt in to my agent-only newsletter. I don't have anything to sell you. I haven't written a book. Maybe someday I will, but right now it's all free. I just send out a monthly newsletter with tips and tricks and marketing ideas and things like that. But also, once you fill that out, and even if you opt out, you can still get the resources that I promised you, which include 2 different kinds of tracking spreadsheets, my 5-year, my contract to close with the 5-year follow-up plan, a little bit of information about using your core values in your business to set you apart, and the buyer and seller intake sheet. And that's all I've got for you today, so I hope that you enjoyed it.
Maura, we have time for one question if we make it quick.
Sure,
and that was from Anna. What is the perfect time spent on lead generation per day or per week? Sure, I see that.
You know, I don't think there's a perfect time. I think that's pretty. I think that comes down to person by person, and it's more about being habitual, because some people may be really great at making phone calls every day and keeping them short and sweet and just, you know, saying hi, but some people may get sucked into a 45-minute conversation with a client, and then, you know, so if you can talk to one person in 45 minutes or 10 people in 45 minutes, then that's a different outcome, right? So I think it really just depends on what you're doing, and it's just a hard question to answer. I have 6 hours a week built in for me, and that includes writing content for my website, shooting video for my website, and for for our email programs, and then writing handwritten notes. And then I try to have 3 face-to-face, either lunches or coffee a week. But that's, I think it really just comes down to how productive you are in the time that you're blocking out, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
And I did put the CRM RealEvolve.com in the links above, but I also just sent it. I'm sorry I wasn't able to send it earlier, but it is down there in the chat room now, in the chat block. Okay.
Thank you very much. This virtual conference session has now concluded. Please close this window to exit out of the session and return to the main conference site to choose the next session to attend from the Day 1 agenda page. Thank you. You may now disconnect.